the Gospel of Luke, chapter 15, verses 1 through 3 and 11b through 32. It is what we know as the prodigal son. All the tax collectors and sinners were gathered around Jesus to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the legal experts were grumbling, saying, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Jesus told them this parable. A certain man had 2 sons. The younger son said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the inheritance." Then the father divided his estate between them. Soon after, the younger son gathered everything together and took a trip to a land far away. There, he wasted his wealth through extravagant living. When he had used up his resources, a severe food shortage arose in that country, and he began to be in need. He hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. When he longed to eat his fill from what the pigs ate, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have more than enough food, but I am starving to death. I will get up and go to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Take me in as one of your hired hands.' So he got up and he went to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with compassion. He ran to him, hugged him, and kissed him. Then his son said, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quickly, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Fetch the fatted calf and slaughter it. We must celebrate with feasting, because the son of mine was dead and he has come back to life. He was lost and now he is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field. Coming in from the field, he approached the house and heard the music and the dancing, and he called one of the servants and asked what was going on. And the servant replied, 'Your brother has arrived, and your father has slaughtered the fatted calf because he received his son back safe and sound.' Then the older son was furious and didn't want to enter in, but his father came out and begged him. He answered his father, 'Look, I've served you all these years, and I never disobeyed your instruction. Yet you've never given me as much as a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours returned after gobbling up your estate on prostitutes, you slaughtered the fatted calf.' Then his father said, 'Son, you are always with me, and everything that I have is yours. But we have had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead, and now he is alive. He was lost, and now he is found.' This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God."
So here we are in Lent. In the Gospel of Luke, we're in the chapters which tell the story of Jesus' journey to Jerusalem. Soon there will be a Passover, and later he will be crucified. We are in those chapters that lead to that in Luke, but we're not quite there yet. We're in Luke 15. In what you probably already know is the prodigal son story, right? This is a pretty widely known parable or story that Jesus told to try to teach us something. We can also call it the prodigal child story because the gender doesn't matter too much. So, let's talk about the context of this story. There was a crowd of people gathered to hear Jesus teach. This was not abnormal. But what's interesting that we learn about the crowd was that it was filled with both sinners and tax collectors, which is to say it could have been a crowd of anyone, right? But the tax collector bit is an interesting bit here. A few months ago, I mentioned in a sermon about the rotten Roman tax system that was going on at this time that created a perpetual system of debt and essentially an agrarian crisis in first century antiquity when Jesus was living and teaching and in ministry. The taxes that were due to Rome each year were more and more and more, and they often meant that fishermen had to sell their boat to moneylenders to receive a loan to pay the taxes for that year if they didn't catch enough fish. And the same with farmers. They might have to sell their family land if they didn't produce enough, if there was a drought or if there was some other issue. If they didn't produce enough to pay for the taxes, they might have to sell that family land to moneylenders to get enough to pay the taxes for that year to Rome. And so it created this system of debt that if they couldn't catch up eventually, they would lose that family land. They would lose that boat that had been their primary way of sustenance for years. So this was a horrible system. It was a horrible time to try to be a farmer or a fisherman. And so this is the time that Jesus is living in. And guess who collected these taxes that were really, really affecting people? The tax collectors. And they would take their salary by skimming off the top of the taxes. So you can see why in antiquity, in Jesus' time, tax collectors were not popular people. I'm not sure that they're any more popular now, but they were really not popular then. They worked for Rome. They collected these really quite unfair taxes so that people could remain in good standing with Rome. And so we hear in the text today that the religious leaders within the crowd and legal experts were watching Jesus hang out with tax collectors and sinners, and the leaders were grumbling, saying, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." And don't miss that, y'all. Don't miss the reason that Jesus told this story. It is in response to this grumbling that Jesus tells 3 stories about something that is lost. He tells a story about a lost sheep. You probably know that one. A story about a lost coin. And a story about a lost son. And that is the story that we're going to talk about today. New Testament scholar A.J. Levine calls the story of the lost son instead of the prodigal son. So let's get into it. In this parable, we see a son who is ready to sow his wild oats, and he goes to his dad, and he's like, "Dad, I would like my inheritance money early so I can go squander it on junk." And of course he did. He was excellent at squandering it away, and the money ran out. And he gets so hungry that he takes a job feeding pigs, which is a noble job, right? Like farming is a noble job. But the thing is that he's so hungry, he starts envying the pigs that he's feeding. And he decides he's got to go back home. He realizes how badly he's messed up. And he starts to head back home with a plan to tell his dad, "Dad, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Would you just treat me like one of your hired hands?" See, the son realized that he had made a giant mistake. But then it takes a little bit of a toxic turn from guilt to shame, and he begins to believe that he is a mistake. He holds this, and then he begins to believe that he's no longer worthy of his father's love. So he goes home expecting to be met with reproach and punishment, and instead the thing that we think is going to happen doesn't. It takes a plot twist, a merciful twist. Instead, the lost son is met with mercy and extravagant welcome by his dad and probably his mom. And they run to him. They don't walk, they run to him. They embrace their child, and we literally have a visceral picture of embodied forgiveness. Jesus tells us, or tells the listeners, that the Father was filled with compassion, but this isn't really a strong enough word. The Greek word used here describes a physical aching of the viscera, the innards. The Father missed his son so badly that he hurt. And when he saw the son come home, he ran to him and felt what it feels like for a part of you to come home. And in that holy moment, we don't see a child meeting a furious parent. We see a son that says, "Father, I have sinned against heaven, and before you I am no longer worthy to be called your son." And we see a dad or a parent that interrupts him here and asks the servants to bring out the fanciest robe, to put the family ring back on his hand. And then he throws him a party, a big old barbecue, because his child that was lost is now found. So while they were having the barbecue and the dance party, the older son comes in from the fields. He's hot, he's tired, he's probably been out there since sunrise, and he hears music. He's told that the party is in honor of his brother who has returned. And this makes him angry. He refuses to attend that party. So the father comes out and pleads with him, "Come, join in the celebration." And the older son says, "Listen, Dad, I have been working for years for you. I have been working so hard. I've never disappointed you or disobeyed you. And yet I've never been given this kind of celebration. You've never thrown me a party. And even more than that, you don't have the decency to come out to the field to get me to come to this party. You don't see me, Dad. I am doing everything here, and you don't see me." Have you ever felt like that? So the dad answers his son, saying, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because your brother was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has now been found." And it occurs to me that the father has two lost sons in this story, not just one. His younger son knew that he had lost his way and believed that he was a mistake. But the older son was lost too. He'd worked so hard for so long and didn't feel seen. He felt like nothing he did was enough. He also did not feel worthy of his father's love. Because if he had, he would have been seen and appreciated for how he kept the ship running for his father. There was a lot of forgiveness that needed to happen in this story. on multiple people's parts. Both of the sons thought that their actions determined whether or not they were worthy of their father's love. And they needed to get up and close and personal with forgiveness. I am sure that the folks who were listening to Jesus in that crowd that day needed to hear this. Those sinners and tax collectors. Jesus knew well of our inclination to have these sticky fingers where we hold on to wrongs against us as close as possible, so tightly that our hands are no longer open to experiencing the joy and fullness of the present moment. And in telling the story, Jesus reminds us that we are beloved and there is nothing that you can do to get separated from God's love. There's nothing that you can do to earn it. There's nothing that you can do to not have it, for it to be let go, for it to go. That's nothing, it has nothing to do with that. God's grace is round and borderless, and it doesn't have a toll booth that you have to go through to get to it. My mom used to tell me this. She would say, there's nothing you can do to make me not love you. You'll always be my kid, and I will always love you. And I think that if God forgives us like this, like running towards us and giving us a huge embrace when we've gotten way off track and then found our way home, if God aches for us to come home, then how much more should we be people who forgive those who hurt us? We can think of forgiveness as just another spiritual practice that we have to practice over and over and over and over as a part of our discipleship. I don't play golf, but I hear it takes a while to get a good golf swing. I think that's what spiritual practices are. We do them over and over and over, faithfully, over and over and over and over, because that is part of our discipleship. And we know, right? Like, forgiveness has to be something we practice over and over. Not forgiving means that anger and hatred and revenge or pain, they fester like a splinter and eventually become infected and diseased. And they leave us, y'all. They leave us as sick people trying to profess a resurrection that we haven't actually experienced. This story of the prodigal child, the story of the lost child, it reminds me of a story from Mark 7. And it's interesting because the stories have nothing to do with each other, really. One is about forgiveness, our text today, and the other is about healing. And they don't have very many parallels. But there's something that Jesus says in this story in Mark 7 that I can't let go of. And I want to read it to you. So we read in Mark 7, "Then Jesus returned from the region of Tyre and went by way of Sidon towards the Sea of Galilee in the region of the Decapolis. They brought to him a deaf man who had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to lay his hand on him. Jesus took him aside in private, away from the crowd, and Jesus took his fingers and put them into his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue. And then looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, 'Be opened.' And immediately his ears were opened and his tongue was released." I love this story. I love it, first of all, because Jesus takes this man away from the crowd, and they're alone. And in this incredibly weird act, Jesus spits. He spits into his hands, and he puts them in this guy's ears and touches his tongue, which is like so intimate, right? But the thing that really gets me is that Jesus didn't say, be better. He didn't even say, be changed. He didn't say, go forth. He didn't even say, be healed. He says, be opened. Be opened. I think that is what forgiveness does. It opens. It opens up the way that seemed closed. It opens up the places in our heart which are sick with grudges or hate or revenge. It opens a place where we haven't forgiven ourselves. It opens those places up so that we can embrace love again. I know that this is not a fun topic for us. I don't know why I get stuck with these topics. No, I'm just kidding. Forgiveness is not really something you talk about at Sunday lunch. It's a tough topic. It hurts when you have been hurt. When someone has hurt you so badly, and you may not even have been given an apology. Maybe you had received one, maybe not. And as unlikely as it seems, forgiveness is a route of healing. Forgiving is taking that power back that they once had over you. Maybe you're able to communicate your forgiveness, and something like what we see in the story happens for you. Thanks be to God. Or maybe you can't communicate that forgiveness for one reason or the other. Maybe you need to have boundaries with the person that hurt you, and it's not a healthy situation to communicate anymore. But even in that case, the work of forgiveness is for you. It's for you to be opened. It's for you to be freed. And this idea of forgiveness and mercy, the thing that we expected to happen that didn't happen, that is the radicality of the gospel. That is why it is revolutionary. It is this kingdom that Jesus talks about, the one that's coming, the one that's here, the one that's not yet. That is where the last are first. It's a kingdom where the children are invited to come to Jesus instead of pushed away. They are a part of the worship. It's a kingdom where the merciful are raised up rather than the cutthroat. And in this kingdom, those who mourn, those are the ones who are blessed because they love someone and they lost them. And in this kingdom, the merciful, those are the ones who are blessed. And the pure in heart, they are who get to see God. In this kingdom, the hungry are filled and the proud are scattered and the peacemakers are lifted up instead of being mocked. In this kingdom, the powerful are brought down from their thrones, and the lowly, those are who are lifted up. Here, the poor in spirit are the ones who are blessed, for theirs is the kingdom. This is the place where forgiveness is given and freely received. This is the kingdom of God. This is what Jesus came to establish out of his love for us. Because he knew that this abundant life, and not exorbitant wealth, not unstoppable power, not insatiable greed, but abundant life is what it's all about. I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly. And it looks like forgiveness. It looks like giving mercy, even when it's not really deserved. Jesus lives out God's extravagant mercy. Even on the cross before he's about to die, what does he say? Before he's about to die from the Roman state, he says, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." Forgiveness is what mercy looks like on the ground. So in this season of Lent, These 6 weeks where we are asked to go deeper than we thought we could go, deeper into our hearts, deeper into our closets. We're asked to go deeper. We're asked to look at those things that are keeping us away from God, those things that are disconnecting us from each other and from who we really are, our best selves. We're asked to look at those things in Lent. Whew, it is a good and hard season, but in this season, in this deep season, I'm adding this. Because you are so forgiven, because you have been so forgiven, because you have received such mercy from God, may you have the courage and the strength to let go of what is no longer yours to hold. Let it go and be opened. Amen.